Okay, so I came across this video a long time ago, and it didn't sit well with me. I'm not even gonna like really go too far into it. I just want to get into it, but I just want to say that this video is wildly irresponsible, and I don't think anybody should take really anything away from this video. So let's just go ahead and watch it.
You use a knife long enough and it's going to get dull. And there's nothing worse than a dull knife. I've said before, a dull knife is useless. It ain't that dangerous, people. You hear them say, dull knives are dangerous. And the theory in that is you go to cut something, I'm using the backside, you go to cut something, it's so dull it slips and then you hurt something else. But if it's that dull, you're not going to hurt yourself.
47 seconds in. That is terrible, irresponsible advice. A dull knife is dangerous. That's why you don't use it. You don't use it because it's dull, because you can fuck yourself up. Don't tell people that dull knives aren't dangerous, because they are. That's how you hurt yourself.
And the process is like this. The stone is wet. Your knife blade is on the angle like this. Your fingers are there, and you draw it across. I have never personally had a whole lot of success doing this. It's not my preferred method. But you can end up with...
That's because you're not doing it properly. I think we all know that whetstones are the best sharpening method. Like you can't just scrape your knife across a stone a couple times and expect it to be sharper. That's not how whetstones work. You're not having success with whetstones because you're not doing it properly. Whetstones take time, they take practice, they take a little bit of finesse. They are worth the time if you learn how to use them. It's not that hard. Also, for a sharp knives are dangerous guy, running off the edge of the stone with the knife is incredibly dangerous. Yeah, he's not handling it correctly at all, and that's why it's not working. I have gotten way sharper edges out of a whetstone than I would ever get through a pull through or a steel or anything like that. It's just flat out incorrect to say that whetstones aren't the best.
Look, my way of telling if a knife is sharp or not is like this. I take my thumbnail on an angle. If the blade goes in and stops, like puts the brakes on, I've got to sharpen up.
That's how you cut your thumb. Do not do this. Do not do this. Do not do this. Do not test the sharpness of the blade on your body. That is terrible information to give to somebody, especially somebody that is inexperienced in watching this. Like, I'll admit, sometimes after I sharpen a knife, I'll see if it shaves my arm. That's because I'm comfortable with my knives. I know what I'm doing. I've used knives for a long time, and I trust myself to do it. I would never, ever in a million years tell somebody to test the sharpness of their blade if they're new to sharpening, or even if they're experienced. I would never tell them to test the sharpness by shaving their arm or pushing it into their thumbnail. That's how you hurt yourself. That's how you cut yourself. If you're experienced enough with sharpening knives to get a good sharpness out of it, then you have probably tried one of these things. That's not beginner advice. That is dangerous advice. Cut your hand off. You want to test the sharpness? You want to see if it's good? Use a paper test. Exactly, TC. Get a thin piece of newspaper, magazine paper. Or like Shannon said, try to get a thin slice of meat, or see how thinly you can cut a tomato. There's so many ways that you can test the sharpness of a knife without actually putting the blade to your body. It's so dumb. It's so irresponsible. Okay. Hey, we're only 2 minutes into the video. All right.
Knife.
His thumb is in the way. Yeah, it is. That is not proper technique. Right there. He's not in a claw. His thumb's down. It's not tucked. I'll forgive the index finger on the spine just because it's a smaller, like a utility style knife, and I do it with those. But this hand, the guide hand, you are setting yourself up to cut your fingers off, especially your thumb.
Next up is the classic sharpening steel, one of the most valuable pieces for sharpening that you can get.
That's a honing steel, not a sharpening steel. There is a difference. Let's see what he says.
So a knife guy taught me this way of using it. I take a towel, I'll put it on the table on a flat surface, point of the steel down, and then using this guard right here that presumably keeps you from whacking off your fingers. Don't say it. Nobody say it. Use this as an angle.
Your knife's not going to get sharp when you keep smacking the edge against stuff. Stop.
To help you guide your knife down, and you slide down and pull towards. Slide down and pull towards, same on that side. So you do this 3 or 4 times on each side, and you should end up with a sharper knife.
Okay, so what he's doing, he's showing you the method that like they teach you to do in culinary school, technically like the proper method. Nobody in a kitchen that uses a steel actually does that. We all just, hold the steel up and, hone it like that. But I also want to point out that that's a honing steel. Honing and sharpening are not the same thing. Sharpening is the act of actually removing metal from the blade and creating a new edge. Honing, which is what the steel does, is actually all the little like micro burrs and abrasions that form on the edge of the blade over extended use. When you run them across the honing steel, you're straightening those out. You're re-straightening the blade. So it's not actually sharpening, and it only takes you so far. Eventually, a knife will have to be sharpened. You can absolutely use a honing steel for maintenance if you're using a knife with a low enough hardness rating. Above 60 or so, don't use a honing steel. But for knife that has a low enough hardness, honing steel absolutely works to help maintain the edge. But it does not sharpen. You will eventually need to sharpen it with a stone or some other form of metal removal. Isn't that like a 40 degree on the blade? Yeah, that was also, he wasn't aligning the angle properly. You have to go in at the angle that roughly the blade is sharpened to.
The cousin of the steel that looks quite a lot like it is the diamond steel or honing steel. Now this diamond edge, not real diamonds, but you can hear the difference. That is much more coarse.
Also a honing steel. That might actually be a sharpening rod. That might actually be a rod that's removing metal. Not 100% sure though. But it's just a coarser steel.
Come to the little guy that I find the most useful, the pull through.
Do I have to say what's wrong with this? Do I have to say what's wrong with him recommending a pull through over anything else? What? Let's just let him talk.
And then you come over here to the fine side that sort of just cleans it up a little bit. And this now is a beautifully sharp blade. Okay, so back to our tomato.
Okay, so let's talk about the problem with pull-through sharpeners. Now, a big issue I have with pull-throughs that this one actually addresses is you can actually set the angle, which is cool. Now, how accurate it is remains to be seen. But most pull-through sharpeners don't sharpen at the same angle your blade sharpened to. They kind of just have a general all-encompassing angle. Now, having just coarse and fine and just pulling it through, they take off too much metal. You're reducing the life of your knife with a pull through because you're taking way too much metal off. You never know exactly how much you've taken off, and you're just shredding metal off the sides. And another thing too that a lot of people don't talk about with pull throughs, you're not getting the whole knife usually. When you set a knife in a pull through, the heel of the blade is usually slightly out, or it's not getting the same amount of contact. So eventually the heel of your blade is going to stay in the same spot while the rest of your knife kind of starts to slope up. And eventually, if you do it long enough over a long enough period of time, it's going to almost kind of get the same shape as like a fillet knife, because it's not getting the proper pull through and evenness of sharpening. So pull throughs are terrible for your knives. If you use knives, fine, whatever. Use a sharpener. But if you've invested in your knives, you've paid good money for them, and you want the knife to last and stay good and get proper sharpness, pull through is about the worst thing you can do with your knife for sharpening it.
And how often do you need to sharpen your knives? How often do you use your knife? If I have a major cooking session and I'm using my Sam the Cooking Guy knife for 4 or 5 hours, before I put it away, I'll sharpen it, and then it goes. So the next time I pull it out, boom, it's at the ready, all sharp and ready to go.
You sharpen your knife as you need to. What he's talking about is honing it. If he's running it through a pull through after every day after cooking, he is destroying the longevity of this knife. You sharpen your knife as you need to. You sharpen it, you use it. Once you feel like it's not cutting quite as well, you sharpen it. That's all there is to it. There's no set amount of time. It depends on how often you're using the knife. Once you feel like it's not cutting as well, you run it on your stones. You don't run it through a pull through every day. That's going to destroy your knife.
Along, fill up the sink with soapy water to do all the dishes. You'll reach in to get a plate and you'll cut your finger off. I have personal experience with that. I still feel bad about what I did to some poor chef in Dallas. I don't want to talk about it. It was very bad. But I didn't know. I didn't go to culinary school.
You don't need to go to culinary school to know to not put a knife in the dish tank. That's so Anyway.
And I will milk that excuse as long as I freaking can.
It's not a good excuse.
Keep your knife sharp.
I think this video is wildly irresponsible. It shows zero actual knowledge about knives and knife care. It's advice that will not only ruin your knives, but can also potentially hurt you or somebody else. This video is bad. It's irresponsible. And I'm not trying to hate on Sam the Cooking Guy. I'm really not. But this video is bad. It's flat on irresponsible. And that's why I think it's the most irresponsible knife sharpening video on YouTube. So that's what I got to say about that.